What if I told you that in 242 American cities, a starter home now costs over $1 million? $1 million. Not a mansion, not a waterfront estate, not a luxury penthouse, a starter home. And if you're a teacher, firefighter, nurse, police officer, or even a young professional making decent money, you might already be locked out of home ownership before you even get started. Listen, when starter homes cost $1 million plus, we're no longer talking about housing affordability. We're talking about economic segregation. Let's get into it.
Is $1 million the new norm for a starter home? A new report by Zillow says in many cities it is. Starter homes are considered the lower third of home prices in any given area, and data shows 242 U.S. cities face these affordability pressures. 26 states have at least one city with $1 million starter homes. New York and New Jersey are the fastest growing states on the list, while California leads with 105 cities at this price range.
Let's just pause for a second and think about how absurd the statement of $1 million starter home would have sounded 20 years ago, right? Those words don't even belong together. Historically, a starter home was exactly what the name implied. You know, a modest house, a smaller home, a home that got you into the market, right? Now we're calling $1 million homes entry level. That should tell you how fundamentally distorted certain housing markets have become. Now, Zillow isn't saying every starter home costs $1 million. They're defining starter homes as the bottom third of home values within a market. That means in some cities, even the cheapest third of homes are crossing the $1 million threshold. Let's think about that for a second. If the bottom third costs $1 million, what's happening to the middle? What's happening to the top? This is insane. Now, as a developer, this is where I start asking questions, right? Is this a housing problem or is it actually a supply problem? Because housing affordability is often the symptom. Supply shortages are frequently the disease.
CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger says first-time homebuyers are facing several challenges.
Prices have gone up, and so have mortgage rates, so has homeowners insurance. We're at the 6.5% range. It's tough out there.
Experts say a pandemic-era housing boom continues to fuel a housing shortage, driving up values.
I actually think this explanation is a bit incomplete, right? The pandemic accelerated housing problems. It didn't create them. The housing shortage has been building for decades, right? After the 2008 financial crisis, home building collapsed, literally. Builders left the industry, went bankrupt, financing tightened, labor shortages emerged, right? America underbuilt housing for years. Then COVID hit. All of a sudden you have remote work exploding, interest rates falling, demand surging, and construction costs skyrocketing. The shortage that already existed got dramatically worse. Me personally, I think policymakers sometimes focus too much on demand side solutions, right? Down payment assistance, buyer tax credits, subsidies. Those programs help individuals, but if supply remains constrained, they can also push prices higher. Giving people more money to bid on a limited number of homes doesn't automatically solve shortages.
Just 5 years ago, and you say, what share of income would it take to buy a house and live with it and pay a certain amount every month? It was about 30% of the average median income.
Yeah.
Now it's 43%.
Listen, forget the $1 million headline for a second. Housing consuming 43% of income is a flashing red warning sign. Historically, housing experts have used 30% as the benchmark for affordability. Above that level, people start making sacrifices. They delay retirement. They postpone having children, right? They skip vacations. They accumulate debt. They put off healthcare. They stop saving. This is what economists call a housing cost burden. When housing costs too much of household income, it crowds out everything else. Now, this doesn't just hurt buyers. It hurts entire local economies because money that could be spent at restaurants, local businesses, entertainment venues, and retail stores is instead flowing into housing costs. One reason Detroit still attracts attention nationally is because we still remain one of the few major metro areas where home ownership remains attainable for middle income households. Now, don't misunderstand me, right? Detroit has plenty challenges, but when somebody from California sees a $200,000 or $250,000 home here in the city of Detroit that would cost millions in the city that they live in, they're often shocked, right? The affordability gap between markets is becoming so extreme that America increasingly feels like multiple different housing systems operating simultaneously.
The average age of a first-time homebuyer is now close to 40. Supply is a huge problem.
There are a lot of communities out there that simply prohibit the construction of smaller homes, right? There are local zoning and land use ordinances.
So let's talk about zoning for a little bit. Zoning is simply a set of local rules that determine what can be built, where it can be built, how large it must be, how dense it can be, how much parking is required, right? Many communities effectively ban things like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts, townhomes, small lot homes, even though these homes and housing types historically existed throughout America. People often say developers need to build more affordable housing, right? But then the same communities oppose density, apartments, townhomes, smaller lots, mixed use projects. You cannot simultaneously demand lower housing prices while restricting housing production, right? The math simply doesn't work. One thing many people don't realize is that developers don't control zoning. Local governments do. Developers work within the rules they're giving. If regulations only allow large homes on large lots, that's often what gets built. Not because that's what everyone wants, but because that's what the rules permit.
Sturtevant says in places like California, income inequality is also a factor.
Even though there are teachers and firefighters and more moderate wage workers who want to purchase a home in those markets, if you have very, very rich people, they're able to bid up the prices of those homes. And I think that's happening in many of those sort of San Francisco area markets in California.
Now, that's another uncomfortable reality, right? Housing markets don't operate in isolation. They're connected to wealth creation, stock markets, tech industry growth, right? They're connected to global capital. So let's imagine two buyers for a second, right? Buyer A is a hardworking teacher and they have a household income of about $90,000, while buyer B is a tech executive. They're making well over six figures a year. They also have stock options worth millions and they're a little bit more liquid, right? Both are bidding on the same property. Who wins, right? The market doesn't care who needs the house more. The market responds to purchasing power. That's why housing affordability and income inequality are increasingly linked. But at what point does a city become so expensive that essential workers can no longer live there? Teachers, firefighters, nurses, police officers, transit workers, right? If those workers are pushed further and further away, eventually the city starts creating problems for itself.
Experts suggest considering a 10% down payment instead of the standard 20% and weighing whether renting offers more flexibility in this current market.
You know, this story isn't really just about $1 million homes. It's about access. Who gets to own? Who gets left behind? Who benefits from appreciation? Who builds wealth? Who inherits wealth? And who rents forever? Because housing remains one of the primary wealth building tools in America. When entry becomes impossible, wealth creation becomes increasingly concentrated. That's a much bigger issue than real estate. That's an economic mobility issue. I'm gonna be honest with you. I know a lot of decisions are made when it comes to where you choose to live, but if we're talking about structure and quality of facilities and housing in general, this house right here, if they're asking $1 million for this, Detroit is littered with these types of properties all throughout this city. Let's check it out. Now I'm on realtor.com perusing what is currently on the market. And this is a really good first step when it comes to looking for properties in certain cities and neighborhoods that you're interested in, even before getting an agent, right? Because this allows for you to really get an idea of what's on the market. Now, one of the things about what we see listed is there could be scenarios where the listing is expired and the property may have already been sold. But for the most part, really, really good first step. So right away, I come across a multifamily apartment building, right? Less than $400,000 for the apartment building that we're viewing right here. And pictures look good. Facility looks like it's in decent shape, right? Under $400,000, right? Now, of course, it may need some and or a lot of bit of work, but the opportunity when it comes to real estate here in the city of Detroit, there is no other city you can compare it to. Let's check this one out. This one is $145,000 basically, right? And brick home, beautiful door. It looks like it's the original door. If you were to try to remanufacture a door like that, you're probably looking at $3,000-$4,000 just for the door alone. You think I'm lying? Go out and check and try to track down a solid wood door that has a half moon at the top like that. Beautiful wood floors, fireplace, plaster everywhere, right? Radiator heat. Some people love, some people hate radiator heat. Kitchen looks like it's in decent shape. I would probably touch it up just a bit, but for the most part, it's complete, right? $145,000. Here's a house for $225,000, 1,600 square feet. 4-bed, 2-bath. Let's check this one out. Cute little house. Porch looks like it has been recently updated. Wood flooring, fireplace, forced air, plaster everywhere once again. Kitchen has been recently updated. $225K. Bathroom is recently updated. Looks good. Basement looks mostly complete. Okay, there's the furnace and a potential third floor that can be finished into living space. So this is the attic, which looks like you in turn have an opportunity to finish this square footage and make it into potentially an office, bedroom, a workout facility, whatever the case may be, right? So not bad. And it comes with a garage. Roof looks like it's in pretty decent shape. So let's check out what this would cost you when it comes to getting a mortgage on said property. And there are some programs here in the city of Detroit that in turn allow for you to have anywhere up to $25,000 in down payment assistance in place for a property that you're purchasing. Let's say in this example, you're qualified for such an opportunity where you're able to gain access to up to $25,000. And in this scenario, that's an 11% down payment. We're looking at $1,683 with a 30-year fixed mortgage at 6.468%. I'd probably bump that up to closer to about $2,000 due to insurance being higher. And when the taxes are reassessed, that is in turn going to bump up your tax burden as well. So $2,100 a month, you have a beautiful 4-bed, 2-bath property in the 48224 zip code. The $1 million starter home isn't the problem, it's the symptom. The real question is how we even got here. Was it restrictive zoning, years of underbuilding, rising construction costs, income inequality, local politics, or all of the above? And maybe the more important question is, if the average first-time home buyer is now approaching 40 years old, what does that mean for the next generation? Are we witnessing a temporary affordability crisis, or are we actually watching the American housing ladder slowly disappear? Thanks for listening to me ramble. Would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. I do have a Patreon community where I share a little bit more of a low-level vantage point of real estate development and entrepreneurship. Would love to welcome you over there as well. Link is in the description below. See you in the next video.